some reason, the reflection of that clock now, I cannot see it any longer.
really?
Straight on.
Oh, yeah, this light.
Is that this light? Something? Yeah. I'm on, all right. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, we're past.
Okay, well, I know we're a little late, but gives us a moment to exchange some pleasantries here if we haven't seen each other. Here we are, and I'd like to call this special meeting of the Kalamazoo City Commission to order for Monday, December 11th. And our first order of business is roll call. Clerk Borling.
Commissioner Cooney. Present. Commissioner Decker.
Present.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Present.
Commissioner Pradle.
Present.
Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Vice Mayor Hess.
Present.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. Thank you, Clerk Borling. And good to see everybody. City Manager, do you have any communications?
None, Your Honor.
All right. Well, so just a reminder here is that this is a special meeting for a deep dive into the proposed budget for 2024. So that is the topic of conversation tonight. We're going to have quite an extensive presentation. But prior to that, as with every meeting that we have an opportunity for public comments. So before we get started here, is there anyone in the chambers who'd like to make a public comment? If so, please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes. State your name and whether you live in the city. And if there's no one here in the chambers who wants to make a comment for this meeting, you can also call in with a comment. That number is 888-382-9556. And we have our Able Communications Director here, Mike Smith, manning the outside lines. Is anybody called in with a comment?
And good evening. Let's try to get here. Okay. Good evening. You're with the Kalamazoo City Commission. You have 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Santiago. I live in the Edison neighborhood. Here to request and support a motion calling for a ceasefire in the Gaza death camp of the Israeli occupation. At the end of World War II, the Nuremberg courts established that not knowing what your government is doing, in this case funding and arming a genocidal campaign against civilians, is not a legal defense in a war crimes tribunal. Those who do not work to end this carnage are also guilty of complicity. Ask any law school professor or a scholar of international affairs who will tell you that the only right of an occupying force is to leave. They do not have the right of self-defense on foreign land. In Kalamazoo, there are 14 military contractors who repeatedly profit from U.S.-funded wars like this one. And you may think that this has nothing to do with you, but what will you do when the indigenous people in this state, with a claim to all the land older than that of the Israelis, push the descendants of the white settlers who stole it to a 350 square mile corner? I understand the restrictions imposed on democratic dialogue by the economic interest in this village, but I look forward to hearing both your reply and the evidence that supports it. Thank you.
I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. I appreciate that, and I want to thank individual who took the time, made the effort to call in with a comment for this public meeting. Now we're working our way down to the focus of our work session. Manager Ritzma.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And I just want to start us off in the right frame of mind and just mention a holiday song title that I think is fitting for this. You know, it's the most wonderful time of the year for budget and all that follows. So glad to be spending this time with each of you. And so we've got a presentation here for you to consider, and then there will be opportunity for discussion and dialogue. So first, I want to talk about ways for the public to view the document at kalamazooCity.org/budget, and then comment on the budget proposal. So what we have coming up on January 2 is a public hearing, and there'll be opportunity for public comment at that meeting, as well as January 22nd, when the budget is brought forward for approval. And we're always accepting comments by email to COKCityManager@kalamazooCity.org. So we welcome that input from the public. Looking back in just how we got to where we are today, so way far back in October of 2017, the City Commission at the time adopted Imagine Kalamazoo 2025, which is the roadmap that we've been using since then in how we want our community and the strategies that we want to accomplish in our community to achieve the best that we can be. So we bring that forward, and then in last November, we began meeting with City Commission commissioners and just gathered some input in preparation for the retreat we had this past February. And we also conducted a survey of the commission as well as the community back in January of this year. And that all fed into the retreat that we had in March. And we, if you recall that retreat, we focused on the 2024 budget, which we're presenting to you this evening. So that really began the process for us in developing the budget proposal that you see before you this evening. Throughout the summer, spring, summer, fall months, we undertook our typical budget development process, looking at special requests submitted by our team and evaluating those based on IK 2025, those City Commission priorities, and how we want the departments to, we want the departments to accomplish in 2024 as part of their normal operating business. So that leads us to where we are today here this evening with the work session. And as I mentioned, from this evening forward, we will have ample opportunity for more public comment on this budget, but I want to turn it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Laura Lamb, who's going to fill us in on how we took the community survey and the Commission's priorities that were developed and brought forward this proposal. Laura?
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. As Jim mentioned, we had an important step in our national community survey that allows us not only to benchmark against ourselves over time, but against other cities. And although there's a rich, robust report, one of the key items that they really encourage us to focus in on is the areas where our community said they have the highest level of priority, but they'd like to see improved service. So in that bottom right-hand quadrant, you see mobility, economy, utilities, and safety. And this is where, after all of kind of the pouring through of the reports, the community survey really suggests, let's look to see what we can do more, where we can enhance, where we can do better. And I think as you get into the budget document itself, you'll see a lot of those themes represented from the community survey. City Manager also referenced our retreat earlier this year. Feels like last year, if I think about it. As you might recall, we spent a lot of time really pouring through outcomes that came to you all as priorities, and then going through the painstaking exercise of trying to evaluate them based on impact and difficulty. And this is where things get really difficult, because there's a lot of important work that needs to be done, but we know to be impactful, we have to really narrow in. So after a really extensive exercise, you all were given the very hard task of saying what is the one thing that we think is the most impactful but the most difficult to do. You see in bold there, reducing juvenile victims of gun violence, rose to the top across the board. So that was the marching order coming in. We've obviously kept that very near and dear to our hearts in 23, but helps us set the stage for 24. Beyond that, as you were going through evaluating those outcomes, there were a number of items, although very impactful, were a little bit more achievable. And you see priorities 2 through 9 as elements that we felt like we could really get a hold of and incorporate into the '24 budget. In terms of things that jump out at you, obviously ongoing support for youth, both in terms of the programs we operate, some of the new programs we've been able to accomplish through ARPA funds. Affordable housing makes almost every list for good reason. We know there's a great need and we know there's possibility for huge impact. You also see some elements around lead service line replacement, remediating lead paint, making sure that we're trying to work to keep our communities safe, as well as how can we work on positive stories, positive impact of what the city is doing and making sure the community is aware of it. Also saw some interest in improving our non-motorized network, both in terms of improving and repairing our sidewalks, but also looking at how might we make sure that they're easier to access in all months of the year. So I think one of the things I appreciate Mayor Anderson often reminds us is the budget is likely the most important vote that you will take every year. Goes on to say it's more than just the numbers. The budget is truly a reflection of our values and represents how we intend to support and serve our community. So you think about the 2024 budget and what we're proposing tonight, we want to ask ourselves, what does 24 budget mean for our community? In 24, we want to be about supporting families. We want to be about investing in neighborhoods, enhancing our downtown, ensuring the safety and well-being of our entire community. We want to make sure that we're continuing to create and shore up a strong city organization. I'm going to now turn it over to Assistant City Manager Kick. She's going to walk you through in finer detail some of these areas.
Thank you. So I'm just going to hit some highlights. You all can read the slides that you have, but I wanted to point out a few things that, again, really came up in our conversations during the retreat and throughout the year. Okay? So we've been doing the foreclosure prevention program for several years now. And so because that has created stronger neighborhoods and we have seen such great success with that program, we started with several $100,000 in that program. Now we are down to supporting that with around $50,000 a year. So the impact of that program has been phenomenal in the community. Again, continuing with our youth programs that you hear regularly how impactful they are to families and to continuing those youth programs. There is also the possibility of, again, housing development that fund, which brings in applications from low-income housing tax credit projects, small developers. We've heard presentations from the PODS program. Those all come in through our housing development funds. And so, highlighting the $3.5 million that we have in that fund that those developments can take advantage of. In the improvement for neighborhoods, we have continued to have a site acquisition fund. Now, this helps us purchase properties from the land bank and from others so that we can continue our home ownership and infill programs that we have been working on with Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services and others. And we've also got a sidewalk snow clearing project pilot this year, which is really, again, an incredible step for us, making sure that the investments that we've been making in those sidewalks and with non-motorized transportation to be sure that they're accessible at all times of the year. In the enhancement for downtown, we have continued with funding our ambassadors program, but another big thing that we wanted to do in supporting both downtown events and the Arcadia Creek Festival site is to really think about reimagining what that site should be for 2023. How can we also build more public restrooms in our downtown, including into that space, really creating it as a park space and not just a festival site place. So we are looking at all the public spaces throughout the downtown. So I don't want to just focus on just the Arcadia Festival site, but the mall, how that connects to Bronson Park, how that connects to the creek, what's going to be our new event center. We've got a lot of things going on. So continuing to look for spaces where we need to support those public amenities with public restrooms, benches, landscaping, great lighting, making sure that we're looking at the public realm as a whole. And of course, looking to support our non-motorized infrastructure by having lots more bicycle amenities, bike racks, making sure we've got a really great pilot that the planning department's working on as well, to do some really great studies around where we need more bicycle parking in our downtown. So there's going to be a lot of really great placemaking and public realm projects coming forward in the next year. And I'll give this one back to COO Lamb.
So in terms of safety and well-being, going back to that number one priority, you've heard quite a bit from our public safety department about the Bridging Opportunities Youth Program. We've seen some great gains, want to continue to support and partner with Boys and Girls Club and our juvenile justice system to help our youth get support, get employment, and really get a pathway towards success. We also see here the ongoing importance to removing lead, both in terms of lead service line replacements as well as lead paint in our homes. Celebrating over $17 million to continue to work on this lead water line work here. Housing is also a big topic of conversation as it relates to ensuring safe and quality housing. We're looking to add an additional housing inspector to the Community Planning Economic Development Department. This one position could translate into over 950 additional inspections a year, as well as helping calls for service that we get through our 311 call center. We also want to make sure that as we have our first responders keeping our community safe, we have an opportunity and obligation to keep them safe. So we're looking at doing some much needed firefighting safety gear replacement to make sure we can keep that going. In terms of creating a stronger city organization, certainly as you are aware, both the administration and the commission put a high priority on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Want to make sure that we continue the great work of our director, Tanya Hewitt-Smith, and trying to expand training opportunities and workshops throughout the organization. We also want to continue to invest in our 311 call center. We're getting additional community awareness. It's translating into additional calls. We want to make sure that doesn't mean additional wait times. So we're looking at changing a part-time employee position to a full-time, and then creating some opportunities for our 311 staff to be out in the community, building relationships and building awareness about calling 311 for accessing city services and getting their questions answered. Also, working on launching an endeavor to help us with our enterprise resource planning system. What does that mean for you? It means that we have an opportunity to better look at the systems that run the city day to day, how to streamline them, make them more efficient, both for the city staff, but as well as the public. So going through a very extensive process to see how many of our systems can we tie up, improve, and make efficient as we look to have to replace our outdated systems. We also have some much needed upgrades in terms of our IT, both in terms of access, accessing the city, accessing buildings, as well as really helping our data center get some upgrades. We're ever mindful of how important cybersecurity is in this current day and age, and we want to continue to do the great work of our IT department to not only keep us from jumping into risk, but should something happen that we're well protected to have continuity of operations. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our CFO, Steve Vicenzi, to go through some of our budget information.
Good evening. I'm going to run you through a high-level version of our budget. As you see here, our budget for 2024 is proposed to be $288 million. That's a 4.8% decrease from last year. Majority of that decrease is really from a reduction in capital spending. Across all funds, we're reducing our capital spending by about $37 million next year. That's largely planned. At some point, you just can't keep doing more and more and more, and some projects get put off either due to capacity or regulations or other planning issues that arise. And when I go back to capacity, I think internally, but also externally with the amount of contractors and what they can handle each year. So for one reason or another, projects carry forward from one year to the next. So we'll still be doing a significant amount of capital, but some of that will be from the 2023 budget just wrapping up. We do have a balanced fiscal plan. It continues to invest $742,000 of our fund balance in according with our budget policies. Those are going towards some of our one-time items, as you just heard mentioned, some of our IT improvements, our ERP system upgrade, using those dollars to help those projects happen. And then just kind of reiterating, we have $77.5 million in capital investment in between all of our funds, including water, wastewater, and streets. And then thanks to the FFE, our residents continue to see increased services and pay lower taxes. In our 2024 budget, the FFE is contributing $15.7 million towards reducing our taxes from 19.27 mils down to 12 mils. So we continue to see that investment coming from the FFE. Okay, and then just stepping in here, some high-level stats. I won't go too deep in a lot of these next couple slides, but overall, we're seeing a decrease in 2.9% from our governmental funds. As you can see on the screen there, that's general fund, special revenue funds, which include your major and local streets, FFE aspirational, solid waste, and grants and donations. And largely, you're seeing a decrease in those funds from a reduction in that capital plan that was mentioned. And then we also have our general capital improvement program related to the general fund that's not in our local major streets or in our water wastewater. Again, just reiterating here, you see the total decrease in our budget of 4.8% down to $288 million, again, due to capital. Our enterprise funds, that's our water, our wastewater, and now this year we're including our parking fund, are going to be decreasing 6.7% to $140 million. You're going to see slight increases in the operating expenses for water and wastewater, but you also see large capital decreases. The wastewater fund's capital plan is a projected decrease of $12 million, with water being projected decrease of $14 million for 2024. The general fund, however, is expected to increase by 8%. The general funds continue to see increases from a strong housing market, where real estate and property continues to increase in value. And along with that, we see a continued increase in our contribution from the FFE. Among our three major revenue sources in general fund are taxes, Foundation for Excellence, and state grants, account for over 77% of our total revenue in the general fund. And then along with the revenue increase, we're expecting general fund expenditures to increase as well by 6.9% to $81.8 million. You can see here the breakdown by department. Largest piece being our public safety. I'd like to note, I looked up some of our neighboring communities. Battle Creek's public safety, police, fire, and dispatch, when you add them together, are 67% of their general fund. Portage is at 52%, and Grand Rapids is at 61%. So as you see here, we continue to see budget savings from the combination of public safety across the board and continued expenditure savings from that. Sorry. The 2024 budget requests 5 new positions to bring our total to 694 total positions and 5 part-time positions. As you can see here, the list includes our housing inspector, which would help clear some of the backlog in our housing inspections. Downtown coordinator, which comes from request as we have taken on a lot of the work related to our downtown entities with the DDA and the DAGA. That's pending that agreement being finalized, but that person would focus on those entities and the work happening in the downtown. And then continuing on here, we have the Administrative Service Division Secretary for our Parks and Rec to help improve their customer service. That position used to be a temp position paid for by temporary wages. Now we're requesting that it be brought to a full-time position. Compliance Associate to help increase grant compliance in our community planning and economic development. And then the one I really like to call out here is the increase in apprentice municipal workers. Those are going to be helping our cemetery fund bring mowing in-house, which is anticipated to provide a cost savings to our funds. So we're always looking for ways that we can provide the same or better service and still save money. On average, that proposal is expected to save the cemetery fund about $130,000 a year. So we're really proud to be able to bring that forward. Continuing on here, our 5-year plan continues to meet our requirement of 15% of operating reserves. As you can see here, we're seeing a decrease in fund balance in 2024, 2025, and 2026, with things leveling out at that point. This is intentional as we look at our 5-year plan. In 2026, we see a large drop-off of debt service expenditures. And so instead of tightening our belt too early, we're trying to ease our way into that, and then you see the continued the lines start to run parallel starting in 2026, which is where we want to be, where we're continuing to increase those reserves and maintain that 15% fund balance. As I've mentioned a few times, more than $77 million will be invested in capital across all of our funds. So we're continuing a strong investment in our capital. See a historical trend here where obviously a little bit off of our peak, but still investing significantly in the city. Again, touching on some of the individual capital plans here, we've got $47 million in our water system, 17 million of that being allocated towards lead service line replacement. I know you've heard a lot about the water system in the last few weeks, so I won't go too deep in there. And we do have Director Baker on hand if there's any questions about the water or wastewater system. And then we also have 13.9 million budgeted in our wastewater treatment fund, sorry. Biggest project there happening with the $1.7 million going towards the trenchless sewer rehabilitation project. I'm not familiar with the details, but we do have Director Baker here if there's more questions on any of those. And then we're continuing our strong improvement or investment into our streets funds. This year we see a little bit of a drop off, as you can see based on history. Some of that is just due to timing. We have jurisdictional transfer funds on hand, we have federal grants coming in, and we have also state grants. A lot of those amounts hit last year in 2023, where they're not hitting here again in 24. So, but we still continue a strong investment when you look at historical numbers there. And then we also have $8.4 million invested into our general CIP capital plan. Some of the key projects to call out here are park improvements at Verburg, Millam, and Spring Valley. We have the Farmers Market multi-purpose building that is funded through a variety of sources, including ARPA funds, grants, and general fund bonding. We also have heavy equipment, which is a necessary component for the city to operate all of our capital plans. And then we have SCBA equipment, self-contained breathing apparatus. Those are for our firefighters, replacing those systems for them in a timely manner so that they're safe to do what they're doing, even though inherently it's not safe work. You've heard mentioned a few times our ERP and our IT systems. You know, is really how we do all of our accounting, how we keep track of everything internally, and how we make sure that we're using funds efficiently. And then finally, facility improvements, which are always a constant need across the city, as we need to maintain our buildings and properties across the city. And then here you just see a breakdown of how we fund those this year. The plan right now is 55 million of that will be bonded across all the different funds. We're currently planning over 15 million in drinking water revolving fund. The majority of that tends to be principal forgiveness right now. The state has put some of their ARPA funds into that program. So we're seeing, even though those dollars are being spent and they're coming in as revenue and expenditures, they're not increasing the rates, or the portion that's increasing the rates are at a reduced amount because the interest rates on those drinking water revolving fund bonds is significantly lower than what we can get out in the open market. And then we also have some funding through ARPA, intergovernmental, which is state and federal resources. And then we have other, which is either cash on hand or it's called contribution and aid, which is related to our water fund when a new pipe gets installed by an outside township and then gets absorbed and owned by the water fund. A little bit detailed on that one. Then continuing on, we have $18.4 million proposed in the 2024 budget to allocate the remainder of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars that we received as a city. See a listing of those here, $3.7 million being invested into businesses and public amenities, $4.1 million invested into affordable housing, $2.3 million invested in infrastructure, including street planning, or tree planting, street construction, cemetery restoration, and stormwater pipes. $1.4 million for public safety, for facilities, retention, and emergency management. $2.7 million for continued investment in youth with our Police Athletic League and our partnership with KidNet. $1.1 million to help replace lost revenue due to the pandemic and our streets and parking funds. And then again, $2.2 million contributing towards our farmers market multi-purpose building. $330,000 for medical debt forgiveness. That was a project brought to us by the county, which would assist in forgiving medical debt within the county. And then $573,000 for administration and good governance, which includes our master planning and community outreach. And then here we just have the detailed view that you can find in the budget book of what our capital improvement plan looks like for our general capital plan. Highlighted a lot of those projects already, so I won't spend a lot of time on those. We also have our American Rescue Plan Act Fund presentation that's included in our budget book. One thing I'll highlight here is this is an expected expenditure plan. We are budgeting the full amounts that are listed in the 2024, 2025, and 2026 column in 2024. By the end of 2024, we have to have everything either signed contract or allocated in a specific way to meet with federal guidelines so that we don't have to send any money back to the federal government. We want to make sure we're using those dollars that were given to us and to help improve our community. And that's a few slides there. Here I have a highlight of what is in the Foundation for Excellence request for the aspirational fund. Continued, increase to or improvement to our sidewalks, summer youth employment, youth mobility, continue with some of our summer youth programming, and additional with our Youth Action Council. So I'll pause here for any discussion or questions.
Yeah, Mayor, I'll kind of facilitate this
Sounds great.
section. Yeah, so thank you, Steve, Laura, and Rebecca. And we threw a lot of information at you in a few slides there. What we really want and value is, your discussion, questions. So we wanted to give a lot of opportunity for that. We've got our amazing team in the back there that if you do have any questions in a particular area, they're available to answer those. So just want to turn it over to commissioners for any questions, comments, or discussion.
Commission, anybody want to have some questions they want to start with? Or Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mayor. So my understanding that we're going to put some restrooms downtown, that's in the budget to do that?
Yeah, we've got several opportunities coming up where we can allocate dollars for that. We were thinking originally like 2 public restrooms in the downtown area in 2024. So we'll have plans for that coming up this year.
Commissioner Decker?
Thank you, Mayor. So again, I was going to ask the same question. So that is allocated within here, correct?
Yeah, it's actually going to be in part of our ARPA. As we carry forward our ARPA dollars, we're anticipating dollars being available in that area. So we'll have a March and a July timeframe for bringing those dollars forward, and then we would be able to allocate that at probably the March at timeframe, and that would come to the commission then as a budget amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Vice Mayor Hess.
Jim, can you articulate for the people the role of FFE in reducing our tax burden? I think tax bills have just come out in the city, and I think there are other items on our tax bills in addition to city taxes. I wonder if you might enlighten us all about the role of FFE reducing city tax burden, but also where tax bills are at this point.
Sure. Yeah, so residents get a tax bill twice a year. The summer tax bill includes the city millage, and as CFO Vicenzi indicated, our previous millage was at 19.275, and as part of the arrangement in structuring the FFE, that millage was reduced to 12 mills, and then the Foundation for Excellence, in essence, backfills that lost revenue. So back in 2017, when first year we did that, people actually saw that reduction. Now, they continue to see the reduction, but their tax bill may still go up because of property values and other millage rates. We're not the only taxing jurisdiction that people pay, so those millage rates could fluctuate, but the city's millage rate has remained the same at 12 mills and will continue to remain the same going forward.
Okay, thank you, and thanks to FFE as well for doing that. County taxes, school taxes are also in that, and we've just voted to increase that in the county as well. Another question, curious about, it mentioned in here, and we saw that there are plans for the Crosstown facility with KDPS.
Yeah.
Are those available, and what are we going to do there?
Yeah, so we're, as you know, the county courthouse, I believe, opened up today. So they will be, or have already vacated our Crosstown facility. I think circuit court was there and maybe district court or probate. So those, basically that was half of the building that's there, and public safety occupies the other half. What that opportunity presents with that space is for us to look at moving our community planning economic development department in there. Currently, they're on North Rose, leasing space, and we did that specifically, we're 5 years into it, knowing that this opportunity at Crosstown would present itself. So eventually, we will have our community planning economic development department there. I believe our IT division, and then public safety would be able to expand a little bit into that space as well.
Yes, Commissioner Wilson.
Thanks, Mayor. I had a question in regards to the $330,000 allocated for medical debt forgiveness. How are those funds allocated or made available?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And so this came to us through the county, and the county in their budget approves funding for this program. It's a national program, and I believe it's most of it's funded through philanthropic donations, a very sizable one. And as I understand it, and there was an article a few weeks ago in MLive kind of laying the plan out, but what happens is the medical debt of an individual gets purchased, so to speak, by this company on, pennies on the dollar. And then what happens is that medical debt is forgiven of the patient or the person that owed it, and then this company then kind of makes whole the hospital or wherever those debts originated from, and then they're able to work on settling that debt however they do so. But I think a lot of it is the philanthropic dollars that backfill that part. So we put in, I believe, $330,000, which represents the city's portion. If you look at a total countywide, in dollars, our portion would be about $330,000. We are constantly in contact with the county, and we're going to track with how they approach this program. I believe they're working on it, and it will be in place sometime this year. And as I understand it, people don't have to apply. They're kind of automatically enrolled in this and will get a notice.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Praedel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about some of the parks improvements. I saw there's about $248,000 for Verburg and $1 million for Millam, and then about $70,000 for Spring Valley.
Sure. I'm going to ask our Park and Recreation Director to come forward, Patrick McVeary.
I should add the Farmers Market multi-purpose building as well.
Yeah, sure.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. So yeah, the park improvements, as you know, we did a master planning session for Millam Park, and that is almost actually completed. Hopefully it'll be included in the new 5-year master plan that we're going to bring to you on January 2nd. But we'll be doing park improvements at Millam Park, hopefully next year, early in the year, so they can be completed prior to our large Halloween event that we have. Verburg Park was a unique park that we actually did a little bit of community input in 2017 and then had to stop due to the EPA cleanups. There's actually, I believe, close to $500,000 for Verburg Park. We have some of the community input, but what we're actually going to do starting in the new year right away is come back out for a little bit more community input and then try and fast track that project to start right away since it's been closed for so long. And then Spring Valley Park, part of the trail is actually deteriorating that runs throughout the interior of the park, and we're actually going to try and work on a portion of that right away with that money. And then we're also applying for 2 grants this coming spring through the DNR, another trust fund grant for Spring Valley, and then I believe a land and water conservation grant to try and get some additional dollars for that park to try and possibly redo the entire trail. So.
Sorry, the other one was the Farmers Market multi-purpose building. I know we've seen that previous years come up as well. But
yeah, so good question. We're actually moving forward with that project. We anticipate to try and come out to bid this spring, and then through the consultants and the contractors that have been designing the building and everything, we hope to actually break ground in the fall of 2024, and then completion would be tentatively right for the 2025 season, but it might be a few months after that.
And then I believe this was all budgeted previously and approved, but for Southside and Emerald, are those still on track for this coming year?
They are, yeah. Actually, Emerald is kind of in the initial stages of moving through the site plan review process right now. We're anticipating starting the playground portion in the spring, and then the field improvements will be sometime in September once most of the soccer season is completed there. And Southside Park is actually kind of along the same lines. We have the playground equipment purchased through the grant that we received, the kind of outdoor building that we're going to be using there, and then that's kind of already moving through site plan review as well, and we'll be planning on starting that in the spring as well, and hopefully those will be done prior to the beginning of June for school coming out, and then actually for our Super Rec program to start with all those new brand new improvements.
Thank you.
Okay.
Patrick, do you want to, on the multi-purpose building, explain what you plan to do with the Crosstown facility that would be closed?
Yeah, so part of the benefit, and I think I mentioned this last year around this time, was part of the benefit of the Farmers Market event building is that will become the new youth development center. The YDC is in the end of life stages for that building. There's some significant issues with the building, and it also needs to be addressed pretty quickly. But what we'll be able to do is transition not only the after-school program, but our summer camp program to the new market event building. And then I believe Director Baker is actually going to use that land where the current Youth Development Center sits as far as stormwater mitigation along Portage Creek and that area. So that'll help out actually with the stormwater infrastructure.
Vice Mayor Hess?
Just really quickly for Mr. McVeary. So I think we have to be careful about referring to that as an event center. when we have a larger event center planned
Correct.
north of town. So like, I think we just have to make sure what we're referring to. I like the Youth Development Center because it takes in our values for youth development here at the City Commission.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Commissioner Cooney.
So there's some improvements for kick pool, right?
Correct.
There's some things in there. Yeah.
Yep, good question. Excuse me, one of the main improvements is the cover that we use to cover the pool throughout the winter months is, I believe, almost 15 years old and in pretty disarray. So part of the improvements will be a new cover for the pool, but then we're also taking advantage of kind of some of the industry standards that we've seen used at other locations, like Battle Creek does this. We're going to try and convert the kick pool from the normal chlorination type factor of sanitizing the water into salt water. And what that does is, not to get too far into the weeds with it, but basically the salt will be the disinfectant for the pool that will essentially create its own chlorine and own disinfection. Battle Creek did that, I believe, at full blast quite a few years ago, and it's actually a little bit safer health-wise instead of the amount of chlorine that's used, and there's also a huge cost savings, especially now in this current condition with the price of chlorine. For instance, like in 2016, I believe we spent around $9,000 for chlorine for the entire summer. This past year, it eclipsed $20,000. Still the same product, still the same pool, but just the cost and those chemicals has gone up. So what that will be able to do is help us to reduce those operating costs for the pool as far as the chlorine, but then it'll also be a safer product health-wise instead of being exposed to the chlorine in such high doses for the public.
There's supposed to be I don't know what you want, a pad for the water, and so what you would do, like a what? A splash pad. Splash pad. What are you going to do that there too?
Yeah, that was like in a long-term goal.
Oh, okay.
We still have those plans, but
Okay, you don't
that's a
have the
huge
money right
investment.
now.
But
I
yeah,
get
we
it.
still have those plans, Commissioner Cooney.
Commissioner Prato.
I was wondering, I just had a few questions for Director Baker about some of the infrastructure improvements.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Baker's in the back there, coming up.
While you're walking up here, Director Baker, good to see you this evening. There's a slide that talks about the $47 million invested into our water system. We've heard a lot, Prince did quite a bit about the heavy investment into lead service line replacement. We've learned a lot about Ransom Street and the heavy work that's going to be done there this year and then next year as well. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about other large amounts there, the $5 million for Westnedge, almost $4 million for phosphate treatment upgrade. Just kind of share, what some of those big expenditures are and why they're important to the public.
Yeah, certainly, this is a great question. I did want to note this is very similar to a slide that we've shown several times during our city commission presentations for the proposed water and sewer rates, and we, do have another meeting coming up on that on December 18th, where we'll request some action items. Just one thing to note: this slide in front of you, $47 million. That's what's in your budget. Our slide that we've been that we've had in front of us on December 4th, and you'll have in front of you on December 18th, shows $54 million for this year. And those differences just coincide with some new funding opportunities that just came to fruition after the budget book was essentially closed. And as those projects come forward, they'll come forward with special amendments. And Mr. Ficenzi's team's been great to work with. We understand where we sit on all that. That's really the new announcement for the 2024 DWSRF project, where we're going to bring to you $12.5 million in grant proceeds. So there's just a lot of good news coming forward with water infrastructure funding here for Kalamazoo. So, specifically talking about these projects, again, all these projects really focus on kind of three goals. One is increased water reliability. What that means is that we want to make the water system, our ability to operate and maintain that water system, so that when you wake up in the middle of the night and turn your faucet on, we want water to come out of your faucet. And so to have a reliable system, we've got to invest in that system. We have to invest in 75-year-old water main that's got 7 breaks in less than a 300-foot section. We've got to invest in smart infrastructure replacements and things of that nature to make sure our stations are able to operate and have things like generators to support them when there's power outages. So the projects you have listed here in front of you, where we're naming a street, that's not saying that the water fund is going to pay for street reconstruction. That's the water main component of that. So for Westnedge Avenue, for Ransom, for Balch, those are all the water main replacement that are associated with those street projects. Station and treatment improvements. This is a whole suite of projects which includes automation at the stations. That is a very important thing for us so that we can remotely operate and dial in these stations and have some fine tuning on the chemical feed rates and the amount of hydraulic capacity that we're pushing from each station. We're also doing things like switchgear, electrical upgrades, new transformers, and new generators as well. The phosphate treatment, we have a slide about that specifically on our presentations that we've been talking about. That deals with our optimal water quality parameters and the optimal chemistry range that we want to have as a water system to prevent corrosion. And so what that will do is essentially get the water to the point where it's the absolute best it can be to prevent corrosion of pipes. That's also the same project that does iron sequestration. So we'll be feeding a blend of polyphosphate and orthophosphate to sequester the iron and then also to create an ideal water chemistry that will prevent corrosion. That project is one of our projects that we're required to complete per our milestone schedule in the administrative consent order that we signed with the state of Michigan in 2021. And that project right now is at permitting. That project, once we comes out of permitting, we have 400 days to implement it. And so it's right now out to bid, and we'll be ready to roll as soon as that project gets approval to move forward.
I was wondering as well, just kind of overarching summary of the 13.9 million for wastewater treatment.
I think I passed it. Oh, here we go. Yep. Yeah, so, this is just a snapshot in time. Of course, some highlights that we're also talking about is that new tertiary treatment facility going online. That's a 3-year project that is, coming online here in May. So that's going to be some major improvements to treatment at the wastewater facility. Trenchless sewer rehabilitation. So those are projects that we do that does not involve completely ripping up the roadway. That would be things like cast or cured in place pipelining for sewer and manhole rehabilitations. So that's work that's going to occur both in the city and in the township to help renew that infrastructure, replace those manholes, and renew that sewer without having to rip up the entire roadway to do so.
And then last, major roadways, roadway projects, they're on the next slide as well. Any major highlights on this that you want to note?
Oh, yeah. I mean, certainly this is, kind of our step into 2024. We plan to begin construction on Michical. So that's going to be kind of our first step into the Streets for All project, which really kind of takes off and it focuses on that two-way work. So that's going to be a pretty long project. After that, we'll start Kalamazoo Avenue in 2025. We've got 2 projects that are kind of fast forward from last year are the Whites Road project in Westnedge. They're not listed here on this project because they, from a budget sense, they occurred last year, but from a reality sense, they're going to occur this year. So that's going to be very impactful. Inkster Street Bridge, that's been one that's been a little long in the tooth on the engineering side and the getting out of the gate. But that is, really from funding. We didn't get the funding until this year. So that project will start this year. And of course, Ransom Street, that's a huge project. That's a wonderful, great project to talk about. It's a cooperation between NACD, Northside Cultural Business District, sewer funding through Clean Water, State Revolving Loan Fund, major street dollars and local street dollars all coming together to really kind of, change the landscape of what you see through that corridor. So that's a 2-year project. We started that project this year, and that project is going to continue into next year. We're complete now through Pitcher. There's going to be some pause through the winter time period, and then that project is going to pick back up and go all the way to West Edge.
Thanks, good questions. Yeah, Commissioner Cooney.
In the materials you gave us last week about the water, there was a lot of information about resources for people that can't pay. And one of the recommendations was that we partner with Southwest Michigan Community Action Agency. They would probably cost us something to do that. Is there something in the budget to make that? Because even though there are funds out there to help people, one of the things that was clear is that people don't know about them and they don't know how to access them. And that's where Southwest Michigan. So do we have any money in the budget to kind of partner with them to make that happen?
Yeah, that's a great talking point, Commissioner Cooney. Going back kind of to the presentation that we had during our last meeting there, we did go into some significant depth on that water affordability program and that water affordability plan. And that's kind of our backbone or our structure as we look to start to implement these programs. One of the things that we developed through that work was a relationship with Community Action Agency of South Central Michigan. So we were already kind of poised to create a relationship. We knew that for us to be successful with implementing a water affordability program, regardless of where the funding came from or what the particulars of the program were, that we would need an agency to support us that is familiar and is doing that work already, and that has the capacity, the training, and the technical know-how to do so. So that was kind of a relationship that we established on the front end early on. And, to support that, we did within the water budget, and it's buried within the line items. There is, I believe, $75,000 to support for administrative fees to support that work that Community Action Agency is doing for us as we continue to partner together to implement that water affordability program.
Commissioner, Vice Mayor Hess.
Thanks for being here, Director Baker. So it sounds like we're doing a whole lot of work. Can you talk a little bit about, I see 16 budget personnel lines added to public services. Can you talk a little bit about that and where those are going and the kind of work that they're going to be doing?
Yeah, so, just from a broad highlight perspective, we brought forward 10 positions in public services that we talked about several months ago before we started getting into the rate discussions. Those 10 FTE positions were focused in water and, really to help support a lot of work that the water department's doing to get out there and implement a lot of these project categories. You also saw tonight we highlighted 2 additional positions that are focused in kind of our public works group that's going to help to support cemeteries, and they're going to be doing maintenance and groundskeeping work to really kind of take some pressure off some contracts that we have been paying. And then there's approximately 4 FTE that are in our wastewater group that are, kind of from previous recommendations that are also supported by those overall rate recommendations that continue to support that work that is occurring in wastewater as well.
Thank you, and we appreciate each and every one of them. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Yeah, Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wondering if we can kind of go through, I see we have the 5 new positions that the team is looking to add, and I'm wondering if we can kind of go through and talk about those. I see that we have a housing inspector. That would be with CPED, if I'm correct. The Administrative Service Division Secretary. That said it would be the Parks and Planning, but would that be also within CPED? And then also the Compliance Associate, that one would be with CPED. I guess I'm just looking for more of a breakdown of all, if there's any extra new positions, if this is just all of the 5. Nobody's paying attention?
I'm sorry, I was, bad move, side conversation here, I was distracting.
Yeah, I was just looking for a breakdown, please, of all of the new positions. I know a lot of them, from what I can see, are going to come from CPED, and it looks like there's a big increase of about $600K in their salaries. Just wonder if we kind of go through that and break that down for us.
Yeah. Steve, you want to?
I was looking at the phone a friend.
You're talking about the additional 600,000 in their general fund operating? Okay, that is largely due to something we didn't talk about tonight. How we're budgeting a little bit differently for some of our community planning positions. Some of those positions in the past have been budgeted directly into the grant fund for ARPA and HUD. Not ARPA, I'm sorry, HUD. This year, we've worked on updating how we allocate those, where they're being charged to the general fund, and then we also do what's called a grants fund transfer to reimburse for those positions. So yes, their budget did increase for the grant funded positions that historically have gone directly to HUD. So we're just improving a little bit of our transparency, but also just getting a little bit better in line with how things like that should be accounted for, because ideally if you charge someone to HUD that shouldn't have been, you then have to transfer that funds back, where budgeting it this way is a little bit easier and a little bit more in line with best practices. And then just kind of, as you're talking about the positions, 3 of these positions are for our community planning and economic development. Just kind of going through here, the housing inspector, that's going to help, like I said, bring up the backlog of our inspections. And that will also, bring in a little bit of revenue to help offset the cost of that position. The downtown coordinator is offset through a contract that we're working on with our downtown entities. And then also the compliance associate is funded, which program is that? Drawfield? Oh, through our HUD home dollars directly. So that position is grant funded.
Thank you. And I know that CPED's got a lot of stuff coming up, and I'm just hoping that we also, I think I saw in here that we're going to have a part-time attorney now go to a full-time attorney. I believe that is correct, what I saw?
That is correct.
That's all I have for now. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. Other questions? Yeah, Vice Mayor Hess.
Well, while we're talking about personnel, we are going to add someone in the city clerk's office, and I know that 2024 coming up, you're probably going to need about 20 extra people, but I wonder, Clerk Borling, if you would speak to the increase in your budget, but that also what that other additional person would be doing.
Okay, so in terms of, in general, there is a significant increase in our budget from this year to next year. And that is actually a fairly normal occurrence when we go from an odd year where we have 1, maybe 2 elections to a presidential election year where we're going to have 3, most likely 4 elections. And so just the fact that there's an increased number of elections means we need more resources. And then as we talk about moving into 2024 specifically, there are not a lot of new requirements for clerks around the state because of Proposal 2. Things like early voting, the impacts of a permanent absentee ballot list, where now we're automatically mailing ballots to around 7,000 voters. And then we're going to be doing some extra things that we've done in 2020 and 2022, like having a satellite location at Western Michigan University for the February and November elections. And so that takes extra resources to be able to do that. The new position in my office, the focus of that person is going to be helping us recruit and kind of just manage the now multiple teams of staff of democracy superheroes that we have to attract and get trained and deploy in a way that, in the past, our processes used to be somewhat sequential, where we would be able to move from one to another, and there would be cutoff dates, and so you could kind of flow from voter registration and absentee voting into voter registration, and then turn your focus to election day, where now we have all of these processes moving in parallel, going on at the same time. So we have to essentially be a team of teams, and so we need more help, more temporary help, and there's a lot of time and effort that it takes to recruit and organize and schedule and just to make that happen. We're very thankful for our poll workers, for the people who help us out in our office around election time, but there's a significant amount of work just to make that happen, to get those people in place and organized. So that's what that new position will do.
I would certainly appreciate you and all the people that work in your office as you take on all this burden of work. So we really appreciate it.
Commissioner Decker.
Thanks, Mayor. Again, I'm just kind of looking at some numbers. I'm wondering if we can talk about what the $100,000 is for other services and parking. Looks like internal.
I would call forward our CFO.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, could you clarify that for me a little bit more?
It's within the parking. It's $100,000 for other services. What other? It also says internal, so I don't know what that is. Hold on,
I may have to do a little additional research for that. My recollection of that would be our outside contractor that helps us manage our parking system.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, City Manager. We had a contract that we no longer have with.
Yeah, the city took over the parking system from the DDA.
Okay, so now this is probably for us now paying to do that, correct?
Correct. Yes, and that's the internal position, internal contract that we have to help us manage the parking system. We did also recently bring to commission a new parking operator. And I would say, as far as this contract goes, this was our best shot based on historical information for our parking system. As that contractor comes on board, we're going to be re-reviewing that budget, and there may be some requested changes as we go forward in the year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions at this time, team? Yeah, Commissioner Prado.
Director Baker, while you're up here as well, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about anticipated sidewalk and right-of-way trees.
I'm attempting to advance the slide where I think it is here. Street trees, am I seeing it? Neighborhood tree planting, yeah. So, we continue our goals to plant 300 trees per year. I think at the retreat, we wanted to get that higher to like 500 trees per year. I think we're seeing some capacity challenges in that when that planning happens and getting that all coordinated. So it's our intent to continue that work. We'll probably be issuing a contract in the spring or summer that would move that forward. Sidewalk work is going to continue. That's been a wonderful program. This year we also have Safe Routes to School, so there's going to be more sidewalk work happening because it's going to be our sidewalk program plus the Safe Routes to School program as well.
Thank you. And this might be a question you could answer, Jim, so Chief doesn't have to walk all the way up here. But I saw in here as well, we're continuing investment in our emergency management coordinator position. And I also saw in here about the recruitment and retention bonus.
Yeah.
Speak to those a little bit as well.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'll call forward Chief. I think he needs to have a little FaceTime this evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, and leadership. So the question was, the first one was on the recruiting retention bonus, or was it?
Two items that were continuations were the emergency coordinator, coordinator position, and the retention and dollars as well.
Yes. So we last year hired Brandy Janes as our emergency manager, and one of the whole goals was that we could be our own recognized emergency management site, so that we could request resources from the state of Michigan without having to go through the county emergency manager. And so luckily, just a few weeks ago, we were recognized as a recognized emergency management site. So now streamline the process, so if the city needs resources for a natural disaster or civil unrest or any other things, we can go direct to the state to ask for assistance without having to go through the county. So it really will help us streamline and speed up resources coming into Kalamazoo without having to go through others first. So it was a big win for us, and it's been a while since they've given that, recognized the city for emergency management site. So that was a big honor, and speaks to the hard work Brandy Janes has done with Chief Huber and the team. So that was ARPA funded for last year, and we're requesting that again for 2024 to fund that position through the ARPA dollars as we continue to build our emergency management capability. The other thing was for the recruitment and retention bonuses. So that was one of the things that we have recognized is we're having a hard time with recruiting and retention. We've so far to date, we've lost 7 officers unanticipated that have left to go elsewhere to work. And so we're looking at what can we do to retain our staff. We ask our men and women of public safety to do a very difficult job. They're asked to do 3 things: police, fire, and EMS, and they can go other places, only have to do 1 job. So what can we do to retain that talent? Because we invest significant amount of money into training these folks. So it's about a year of training before they're released on their own, and when we lose them, it's a big cost to the city. So we're saying, what could we do to incentivize them to stay? And one of the things we asked for was the ARPA dollars for a 3% bonus that's final average compensation, so it doesn't go into their final average compensation or retirement. It's just a one-time 3% bonus. We received that last year. We're asking for it again for 2024 and then 2025 in the last year of that. So they will be getting another 3% bonus in March, and then again in March of 2024 as well. I'm sorry, 2025 as well. And then also, part of that money also goes to lateral transfer bonus. So we're offering $15,000 if you have previous police or fire experience to come here. And again, we invest about $100,000 in training. So if we can get someone that's already trained, ready to hit the ground running, that saves us money. So we're doing that to incentivize folks to come into public safety. So in just this last week, it's starting to work a little bit. Just this last week, we hired 2 lateral transfers, and then we have another one that's anticipated to start in December. So again, that really helps us with our staffing shortage, and it's another way that we can get more folks in the door at public safety.
Yes, Commissioner Cooney.
Chief, I just want to say I was so glad to see in there that we're continuing the police athletic league.
Yes.
I think John's doing a terrific job, and so he's so creative. He's got a sewing club now, and he's got all kinds of people joining that, and he just keeps expanding it. Did a really good thing with the Lions last year, and he wants to expand that. So I think that's a great investment with all the other wonderful things you're doing about trying to turn youth in a different direction. So thank you for all that.
Yes, thank you. And our number one goal from the City Commission is to reduce youth violence, and that is another big tool to keep our kids engaged in something positive. And you're right, Johnny Berry and the Parks and Rec Department are doing a great job of coming up with programming, getting a lot of kids to participate in those programs. Rocket football, youth football was a huge success this year. Midnight basketball was a big success, and we're actually looking to expand that into critical conversations with youth that Johnny Berry will be facilitating between youth and law enforcement, really to break down those barriers and improve relationships. So it's a big win also.
Other questions, Commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you, Chief, but this one is not for you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. All right. Good night.
Don't go too far.
I'll be ready.
Director Baker, I have a question. Last week, we heard from someone in the chambers in reference to Shippers Crossing and how that is being maintained by the city. With some of these new additional positions, would we be able to take care of that kind of stuff with the in-house mowing and things like that?
Yes and no. So the broad answer is yes. The more capacity we can build internally, the more we can utilize that capacity to get after some things that have fallen by the wayside, so to speak, and to kind of regain some of that deferred maintenance, especially property maintenance that has gotten away from us over the years. Initially, the 2 FTE, they're going to come on board. Their daily task is going to be to mow something over 4 acres to keep up with what we've got for the cemetery. So I don't know if any of you have ever mowed before, but performance measurement of 4 acres a day is pretty steep hill to climb. So I would imagine that initially we're going to have our hands full to handle what we're attempting to handle with the cemeteries. But in time, we're going to get better at that, and we're going to realize some additional capacity. That being said, if we free up some capacity from that cemetery contractor, that could become a wastewater contractor and can increase those frequency mowing. So I think, overall the answer is yes. I just wanted to be very honest and transparent in how we get to that yes, and that it might not be city crews from jump or from day one.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Hoffman. Other thoughts, questions, or comments? Yeah, Commissioner Cooney.
I wanted to enlarge a little bit on Commissioner Wilson's question about the medical debt. This is a new program that has been implemented on the east side of the state now, and I think the total is about $1 million between us and the county. And with that, we can buy, I think, $30 million worth of debt. And that is focused on low-income people. And can you imagine what that's going to do, how many people we're going to be able to help with that, and what that'll do, because there's people who now won't go to doctors or to hospitals because they got this debt and they can't pay the past bills, and what it's going to do to their credit scores. So this is like something that dropped out of heaven, and we're just glad that we're taking advantage of it and going on that. The second thing I wanted to say was I'm really impressed with what the Foundation for Excellent Funds are doing for youth. That one page that we have there talks about the wonderful resources that they're giving to our great Parks and Recreation Department, which does such a terrific job and able to do so much for our young people in the summer. I just think that's great.
Yeah, very helpful about the, I mean, that was an opportunistic thing as it relates to that medical debt. That was something we'd never contemplated during a retreat or has come up in a budget before, right? So, other questions? Vice Mayor Hess?
Not sure. I think, Steve, this might be for you. So when we get grants, get these great grants, we got $1 million for trees, right? Does that go into the budgeted line, and does that replace the budgeted for trees, or is it added on over and above? What is the role of grants, and where do they fit in the budget?
That depends. So in our presented budget, if we don't have the grant already in hand accepted, it's not in the proposed budget. It would then be added to our amended budget during the year. And then it just depends on what the grant's for. Some grants may come in and help supplant funds that we've already planned for something to then let us reallocate those funds towards a different project. And some grants may be, they don't allow supplanting, so then it's above and beyond. So it's just kind of on an item by item basis. Yep.
Mr. Decker.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wondering if we can talk about, as Don brought up the Foundation for Excellence, if we can talk about within the complete neighborhoods, the $1 million, like really what is that going to be? Do we know of any areas where that's going to be used at, or where they're going to be doing these improvements? We've got the bus stops and accessible ramps, phase 2 of inventory, not exactly sure what that means. Replace and repair broken sidewalks, definitely understand that. Install sidewalk connections, definitely understand that. So I guess I'm just kind of wondering, do we have a plan of where we're going to be doing these things? Director Baker, I know you probably already spoke about this, but it is a lot of money, and I think, being able to tell the community where we're doing it to improve would be good.
Yes, I don't have that plan in front of me, but I do know it's pretty widely spread out across multiple neighborhoods, especially like the bus stops. We coordinate with street projects and other areas to move that forward. So that is going to be something that we will be bringing forward in packets for city commission approval when we award that work to the contractors. So when we break that out for bidding purposes, it always is broken out into sections. So there's going to be another opportunity for us to talk about that. And I can ask staff to prepare kind of a map or overlay to show where all that is, that we can talk about it during our next meeting.
Thank you. Yeah, just to kind of see, and we can show the community, these are where we're going to be doing these updates at. Thank you for that. And this one also pertains to the Foundation for Excellence regarding gathering information when we start to do our IK 2035 and neighborhood engagement and outreach. And, many of our neighborhoods do not have neighborhood associations or do not have their master plan quite yet. I know Jay Slaby is working adamantly on getting those done. So I'm wondering, or I'm hoping that there would be some kind of funds to maybe assist her and her team as she goes out to engage neighbors. And when I say that, I really speak on, we had an event at Crane Park for the West Antilla neighborhood, but because within CPED, between Parks and Recs, that they're always sharing all the fun stuff that the community likes to do. So I'm really hoping that somewhere within that we can find some funds to kind of beef up that area. So it's more, I guess, engaging as the community comes out.
I just wanted to point out, Commissioner Decker, that there's also a line item within the ARPA budget. And I can have Christina, if you would like her to speak to specifics, she can talk about that. But there is an additional line item in the ARPA budget that adds to the FFE dollars. So there's about $330,000 in total engagement funds between the two.
That is good to hear, because you know I'm looking and I can't see that screen. Well, as long as I know there's good funds in there, that's good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good governance. Underneath last item, $330,000. Imagine Kalamazoo engagement and outreach for $243,000 for this year, and then $330,000 for 2025.
I'm pretty sure, Chair, I'll find it. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Other questions, Commissioner Decker, at this time? Are you all set for now?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay.
I'd just
Deep
like
in
to
thought.
add
Yeah.
that at our next Committee of the Whole meeting, next week, Monday, we are going to have a Imagine Kalamazoo 2025 review of accomplishments. So you'll see a lot more on where we've been and how we've come to satisfy what was in our Imagine Kalamazoo plan over the last 6-7 years. So.
Thanks, Mayor Jawisma. Other questions at this time? Commissioner Pradel.
Forgot to ask you about this as well, Director Baker. The sidewalk clearing pilot, I know that's been on the radar for a while. That's $84,000. I know communities asked for that quite often. We see that on some of the major streets quite often that, because they're so close to the road and plowing service, oftentimes they get obstructed and you see a lot of pedestrians walking in the street. So this is exciting to see that this is coming to fruition and we're trying it out. Will that begin this year? Could some of these dollars potentially be used in January, February, March, or whenever the post-budget approval is?
Yeah, so those dollars aren't with us today at the moment, and we would have to bid out. That's going to be a outside contractual services contract, likely with a lawn landscaping contractor. From out to bid to city commission award is a process that takes about 90 days. So it would likely for us to be able to get that out in
next winter, maybe.
March. So that's, not going to occur during the 23-24 winter season. That's going to come out with the 24-25 winter season.
Yeah, I was kind of curious with that as well. How do you, with as many major streets as we have, how do you prioritize which streets to start with the pilot? I mean, is that something that still needs to be kind of evaluated as well?
Yeah, and that's something that, the team's been working through. There's been a Bloomberg study group that's really been focusing on all this great work, and some of the things that we're looking at, as well as a group of sidewalks that we refer to internally as city responsibility sidewalks. And those sidewalks could be things like sidewalks in front of City Hall, sidewalks in front of Stockbridge, and sidewalks in front of, you start adding up every single city property that we have. Some of them very obvious. City Hall is one very obvious city property. That we also have not so obvious properties. We have brownfield properties and other public services properties that don't have a daily functional use. And so what we're working, really to hold ourselves to a higher standard to prioritize and make sure that we can get those routes done. And then where we fall short, that we're turning those over to the contractors. So a lot of that work is going to be contractors removing snow from city responsibility sidewalks. We also have downtown where we understand there's population densities and folks that are walking around, moving around that we want to pay attention to. We also have some neighborhoods that are, more transient populations in that they're folks that are here, maybe they're going to college, maybe they're renting a home, and maybe they don't have all the features that a homeowner might have with a snow blower and everything else. So we're going to be looking at those neighborhoods as well. So it's a yes and conversation that we're going to have to focus on the sidewalks that we know that are our responsibility, and it's other areas as well, commercial areas up and down Westnedge and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. I know, one area that I would ask is if it's possible to prioritize areas with young people, especially like walking to schools on major streets. There's not a lot of schools that are like on a major street or where there's, say apartment complexes where people have to walk to get to a school, but if there's any way to prioritize those other areas. I know the other thing that almost on an annual basis, as long as I can remember being alive in Kalamazoo, is the stretch of West Michigan Avenue from about Howard to a lot of the student housing. There almost inevitably have been either deaths or severe injuries because students walk in the street because the sidewalk is obstructed. And I wonder if there might be some partnership opportunities as well with the university to maybe split dollars or contribute to the pilot as well to help with that.
Yeah, I can tell you West Michigan from Howard to Drake is an area that we're looking at.
Cool, awesome, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mayor, I felt maybe we have IT here as well, and there's a couple large expenditures, and I wonder if you have a chance to talk about the ERP, the Enterprise Resource Planning, and the Access Control. Both those are over $1 million in spending this year.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Brought Steve up here to talk about the ERP system, but we'll talk about the access control system upgrade. So our current access control system, which is our badge system, is outdated. So there's a security issue with that, as well as bringing all of our access control systems to one consolidated system. So that's quite a few doors and quite a few buildings to do that. So that's the major piece of that cost.
And then I'll jump in with the ERP project. That's our main accounting software. That is our general ledger, our accounts payable, our cash receipting. And those systems touch virtually every system at the city. Also includes our payroll and timekeeping. So that's, the last time we installed our ERP was Eden back in 2006. So we've been working on that system for over 15 years. And they're going to their end of life is 2027. So we need to start working on this project now. It's going to take us about 6 months working with a consultant to then bring forward recommendations of what would work better for us, what would help us gain efficiencies, and what would talk to some of the other systems that may not be a part of that. The Public Services uses a work order system. If we can get an ERP that talks to that system better, it just improves efficiencies for both us and them. Amazingly, really couldn't put a price tag on what that would do if we could do that. And so it's really just bringing in all of those systems and trying to find the best uses that would hopefully, like I said, gain efficiencies down the road.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Question? All right, seeing none, I have a few, and it's kind of like, I guess I'll work with a smaller question, kind of get up to a more macro level, but just as far as some smaller things, one of the things that we've been, not so small actually, but a specific item, the Director Baker, changing this connection spot here where GPI flow comes in, is that budgeted in here for this year, that work?
Yes, sir, Your Honor, that is. That project sits as a 2023 funded project. Okay. There's $1.7 million that were allocated in 2023 for that work. We have purchased that pipe, so we have that pipe sitting now on deck, and we are working with GPI to develop and draft a third-party construction agreement, which we'll bring forward to City Commission for additional consideration that would, essentially work to get that work completed.
That's great, because it did not seem to be in the 2024 budget, so this is a carry forward from 23 then, right?
That's correct.
Okay, super. Just another thing while you're up here, I know, we rank, our priorities and go through all that, but something that I think all of us hear about a lot is the state of our streets in Kalamazoo and dealing with patching. And, I heard a lot about Reed Street, for example, this year from a building blocks project over there and how patched that is. Are we going to ever be able to keep up with getting our streets back to where we want them? And I know the investment is down a little bit this year than it was last year. What's your overview on what's it going to take to get our street system to where we want it to be, I guess?
So, this is a very complex discussion. I think something that we could probably spend an entire committee, the whole meeting on to really go into the details. There's not a simple answer, and there's not a simple solution to it, but it is something that we've been working on for a number of years and working with the great team in management services to understand what our capacities are and what our limitations are. I will tell you the reduction in overall CIP isn't due to a reduction in local street spending. We continue to focus spending in local streets. A lot of that is just kind of the ebb and flow as those big projects come in and go out. Last year we had Whites and Westnedge as some pretty significant projects that were bringing that overall capital investment number up, even though those projects will be implemented this year as carry forwards. So there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of focus energy that we have right now on our Complete Streets for All project, where we'll be implementing the two-way work. For the most part, that work is receiving heavy subsidies in federal and state funding. So dollars coming in from $20 million from federal highway. We've got dollars from CATS that are coming into program to help with that work. So that's where a lot of our focus is. As those projects come to a close over the next 5 to 10 year period, we anticipate that work is going to be done by approximately 2029. You'll see that our overall Payzer condition for major streets is going to be really high because we've got a whole bunch of new streets. And at that time, we can kind of shift our momentum and focus back on local streets, and we'll have a lot of capacity, a lot of energy, and a lot of focus to be able to do so. So, I could go on forever on this topic, but I think it's something that, we probably should come forward to the City Commission and really talk about and go into the details on how this all works together and what some of our strategies are to, get more dollars into local streets.
Yeah, Mayor, we will have a committee of the whole meeting dedicated to this. So we actually had it on the calendar way back when, and then this thing called COVID hit, and
yeah, remember
and
that.
it got sidetracked.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think that's really important. Just spend some time. I appreciate that. Something that I hear, it's not a rare thing I hear, is that, well, you're taking all our street money and you spend it all downtown, so you're not taking care of the streets because that's all you care about. So it's just a reminder that much of this money that might be spent on conversion or some of this lane narrowing and changing, this is specific federal grant money for that activity, not general money that you can use, to pave a smaller side street. Is that accurate?
That's 100% correct, Mayor. So, these projects that we go after, Kalamazoo Ave, two-way construction, those dollars that we got from federal government are very specific to what that need and that cause is for those two-way conversions. And we couldn't take those dollars and just, hey, we received the dollars for the two-way project, but we're going to apply them for local streets. That's not going to fly. We can't do that. And in terms of applying for dollars for local streets, to our knowledge, and we just haven't had those opportunities open up like these big opportunities are for our big streets downtown. So the streets are different classifications, and there's different funding programs for them.
Right, that's helpful, I appreciate that. Just another couple things about that. I guess we're set, in general, talking about outside funding, thank you, Director Baker. Do we have, though off the top of our heads, outside of our regular granting that we might get from HUD and that kind of thing, just because we're a participating jurisdiction with HUD and get those, do we have any sense of how much resources come to the city based on grant applications that is a work above and beyond? I mean, we've done a lot of work here. That's all based on us seeking funding here, and I know we have a grants position in particular now, which we had talked about for some years, and you don't have to answer that tonight, but just be interested to say, what has been the result of us being able to spend some focused time looking for additional resources? And like I said, you don't have to have that answer right now, but you keep hearing about whether, it's the revolving fund, drinking water, and all those additional dollars that come in, or the money for the downtown work, parks, grants, on and on and on. It'd be interesting to know what that number might look like. I think it's going to be a pretty big number, and I'm going to suggest that investment in having some grant assistance here is really paying off. It'd be nice to know that, yeah.
Yeah, Mayor, and there's actually a whole dedicated section of the budget for that. And so for grants and donations, revenue for 2023, total revenue of about $25 million. Proposed for 2024 will be $18 million.
Right.
So those are not HUD, that doesn't include HUD or other types of grants we receive.
All right, appreciate that. I think that's very helpful. Do we have a target move-in date that we're hoping to have the Crosstown property ready for? Will that be in 24, or do we think it's going to be further away than that?
Rebecca, you want to come up? I think we're probably looking at phasing in how we move into that space.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Mayor. So right now, we have a lease with Community Planning and Economic Development through the first quarter of 2025 on Rose Street. We have finished our first phase of studying how large the space is and talking to everybody, how much space does IT need, how much space did KDPS need, how much space did Community Planning and Economic Development need. So we've got our first rough sketches of how to utilize the building. And while we were thinking about the phasing, we first put the whole team on, there's a lot of space. It's about 40,000 square feet. Just to give you some numbers, the space that CPED rents right now from Plaza Corp on Rose Street is about 11,000 square feet. So there's plenty of space for everybody. And so we've done some sketches about just all being on the first floor together. We've done some sketches where we put a community room on the first floor and then move some of the offices upstairs. We've done a sketch where we combine the entrances of KDPS and Community Planning and Economic Development to have one entryway, so it's just one big city building. We've done some also with a community space on the top floor and offices on the bottom floor. So again, we're just in a very brainstorming space right now. We hope to choose our final direction and then do bidding possibly second quarter of next year so that we could start construction. So we probably wouldn't be moving into that space until 2025.
Okay, great, thanks, Rebecca. And so all that said, it's hard to identify a number, but we have put some numbers out there for that investment, right? That capital investment, that building, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very preliminary.
And obviously,
I presume.
we would be prioritizing the office space, and the community space would be phased in, like as, you know, we wanted to do something with the second floor. You know, if we can get the first floor done and ready for move-in for 2025, that would be the priority.
Super, thank you. So in every scenario, when we work through United Way or when we work through KidNet, you know, we always see much more come in terms of applications and people wanting to do good work than we have resources to share, sometimes 2.5 times what we ended up sharing. So as an internal process here, and while we're going through this with all our city departments, is there easily describable sense of what is there's a lot of great things we can be doing. How much do we have to do when the requests come in from departments in terms of saying, well, we're making hard choices and, you know, we got twice as many budget requests as we were able to fund any given year. How does that work out for the budgeting team?
Yeah, so as I indicated at the beginning of the meeting, you know, we start out with the commission priorities and information from surveys and so forth. And from that, departments develop their special requests. And then there's actually a very robust scoring system that takes in a lot of dimensions like priorities, but also, you know, is something mandated, required, or not. So that all is compiled, and then literally we have a team that goes through that and recommends what those special requests that are for approval based on what we anticipate the amount of funding available. So that's all done, and we've been doing this now for at least 3 years, I think. So it's worked out pretty well.
Okay, I appreciate that. Hey, so just kind of circling back again on this, and I know that several of us have probably heard this, and you referenced it, Vice Mayor Hess, related to this idea of like people got their tax bills in the last couple weeks, and look at those bills, and then you start hearing, holy smokes, you know, what's going on here? My tax bills increased. You know, what's going on? What are you spending the money on? That sort of thing. And I guess just a reminder here for starters on this bills that come from the city and are due on February 14th, there is no actual city millage request in those bills. All right? So this is, although issued by the city, this is not we get bills twice a year. This is not the bill that the city millage appears in. So just as a reminder, and, you know, whenever you look at that tax bill, take a moment to look down that list. That's just kind of the right side of your bill, and you will see all the various things that you are funding. And so the way our system works is if you own a piece of property, you carry a big load in terms of things that you fund. And several of those things are things that you vote to have on your tax bill. And I think we have people who, even though it's painful when you get the bill, we continue to have voters in Kalamazoo County that are supportive of public undertakings that they feel that are important, and bless them for that, including all of us up here. But that does mean that shows up in your tax bill. So I can't remember to delineate all of them that are in this tax bill, but you're going to see things like not your local public school system. What's the bonding that's in there? What are the county? What is the library? What is Kalamazoo Valley Community College? What are things like the housing millage? Those kinds of things all end up in that bill. And even though the tax bill for the city of Kalamazoo, you know, was reduced by approximately 38%, something like that, literally moving from more or less 20 to 12. The city of Kalamazoo portion of the tax bill is less than 25% of the total tax bill. And I was just reminding myself and talking to Jim about it up here is that the total mills you pay on your taxes for non-homestead is just a little under 70 mills in the city of Kalamazoo. And you can look all that up and see what the mills are, you know, from one jurisdiction to another, about 68 mills. But for the homestead rate, it's about 50 mills. So that's the total millage rate you're going to be paying over the course of the year, value on property, and approximately 12 mills of that 50, less than a quarter, are the city portion of it. So, just a reminder for all of us, comes in the mail from the city, that doesn't mean that all goes to the city. As a matter of fact, none of it really goes to the city from this particular bill that's coming up right now. But it's also reminders that if you look north of us and the plan that Grand Rapids has now, closing public schools, I don't know if anybody's been watching that, there are 10 additional schools slated for closing that they're proposing up in Grand Rapids. And here in Kalamazoo, we have been doing, it's a very much different scenario in terms of people staying in the public schools and the fact that people that live here are willing to keep supporting our public school system and making sure we have new buildings. We just all had a chance to go through the new Edison Academy, a beautiful, beautiful school, supported by people in the Kalamazoo Public Schools District who are willing to make that kind of support. And the, great housing work that is occurring out of the county millage being allocated by county board, once again, voters in Kalamazoo County who voted, I'm willing to tax myself, for this work because we know there's an issue with housing. And we're doing work here in the city to address that, but we're part of the county, and the county is having another opening for people to apply for those millage dollars. I think right now it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.5 to $4 million available this year. Because some prior years there were multi-year commitments made, but that's going to be, I think that portal is opening on December 15th for that. And the fact of the matter is without that millage, it is possibly very likely that we wouldn't have things happening like this senior development that we're watching, the additional foundation walls being built over on South Rose. There was a big gap there. There's county millage dollars in that to fill that gap. So, even though there are things that we talk about, and I'm glad we're going to be talking about our streets more, that we can't get done, it's really, there's a lot of things that are getting done, and I really appreciate how the community works together. The last thing I just wanted to get back to here is that, right at the top of our priority list is related to violence, Chief Boyson, and we've had a very, very challenging year as it relates to homicides. It's something none of us are in any way, satisfied with what's happening there. I know that we can't control that, and we've got a lot of programs going, and it's so important with young people, Commissioner Cooney. But do you have any comments on that in terms of that's our number one goal? What kind of work are we sufficiently funding that work to try to get to that in 2024?
Yes, thanks, Mayor, for that question. It's been a frustrating year with the homicide numbers, and when you look at our overall Part 1 crimes with violent crimes, we are down significantly in violent crime in the city of Kalamazoo over last year and then over the last 2 years. So we're down, I just pulled the numbers this morning, we're down 16% in overall violent crimes from where we were this time last year, and down 26% from 2 years ago. So every category of violent crime, which includes aggravated assault, criminal sexual conduct, murder, and robbery, every one of those things is down except for murder, like you said, our homicide rate. And it's frustrating for us because we have a lot of things in place that have got a handle on our traditional murders, which used to be mostly group involved, back and forth, retaliation over shootings. And we had a little bit of that earlier this spring and summer. And the strategies such as group violence intervention, our bridging opportunities, our youth outreach, our focused deterrence when it comes to a small number of youth that are driving the violence, that has been working. And we're not seeing those type of homicides. We've been seeing some ones that are kind of random, where people that weren't on our radar, not involved, not much of a criminal history, pick up a gun and use a gun to settle violence. And those are really tough for us to get ahead of because there's not factors that we identify leading up to that, like in traditional group-involved violence. So we've had a lot of those this year, and it's been frustrating because when you see the overall violent crime going down, but that one category going up, I think there's a lot of one-offs that we've experienced in 2023, that the strategies that we're doing are working, and I think if we stay the course with our outreach and enforcement and the balance of those two things, we will see that number go down. But it is super frustrating for, I know, the community and all of the men and women in public safety that have to deal with these incidents far too often. So I think we have the right things in place. There's a question about support. I think we have the right things in place. Of course, we'd love to have more officers on duty, but that is more of a recruiting and hiring thing, not a budget thing. But I think the strategies are properly supported between bridging, group violence intervention, our crime reduction teams. But again, I think the strategies are working. We just got to stay the course.
Appreciate that, Chief.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Any other questions for our great team here at the city at this point? So I'll turn it back over to you, Manager Ritzman. I just want to say just thank you. Was there something else you want to bring up?
No, I was just, can we advance the slides to the last slide?
Last one, okay. Just before we wrap it up here, I appreciate everyone's input here. This is not the last time to talk about this budget, right? We're going to have a budget hearing, and I know you're going to get to that. But I just want to, specifically thank Chief Operating Officer Lamb, who's here, and Assistant City Manager Kick. I think that Deputy City Manager Chamberlain is out of town, is that right? And Manager Ritzman here, and the whole team that has to work on bringing this to us. It was interesting, your comment talking about, our retreat last year, which somehow seems like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. I don't know how that happens. But just a reminder that long process, we have our retreat coming up again this spring, which will begin this whole process all over again. But just thank you for your diligent work and your effort on all that. To you, Manager Ritzman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. A couple of things before we go to next steps. So if we were talking about millage and the 12 mills, the city also has a solid waste millage of 1.8 mills. So that's been in place for a long time. It covers things like recycling and leaf pickup. And so, those are definitely millage dollars used for direct services provided to everyone in Kalamazoo. Mayor, you thanked the staff that I were going to thank. So thank you so much, especially Steve Vicenzi and Stephanie Redant, our budget officer. They've done incredible work in pulling this all together. I was talking with Steve this morning, so, this happens all during the holiday season. So, what does that mean? And fortunately, things wrap up usually by Thanksgiving, but Steve told me that Thanksgiving's not a really good time for him. But he will be able to enjoy the holidays now and move forward with that. And then our directors and the people involved in the departments around budgeting, a great team there that ultimately it takes everyone to get to where we are today. So as far as next steps go, you mentioned January 2nd, we'll have a public hearing, and then we would be bringing the budget for approval on January 22nd, and then we will go from there. And as you said, we will start the 2025 budget shortly thereafter. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Manager Ritzma. Thank you, team, for all your thoughtful questions. And at this time is an opportunity for commissioner comments. Does anyone want to take advantage of the commissioner comment opportunity here? Just a reminder then, we have a regular business meeting again in a week. So we'll be back together for that. And at this point, we are adjourned.